This is a talk through the poem Sonnet 116. You can see that I've bought a stylus and I'm not great at using it yet, so my writing is a bit rubbish, but I will practice using it. Okay, so what I've done first of all is just colour code this poem into 3 main themes. First 8 lines are all on the theme of love, which is clearly the most important theme in this sonnet. Second theme goes on to think about time, so you've got a quatrain on time, and then the final couplet thinks about the theme of poetry itself. So I used a few structural terms in that first description. Obviously this is a Shakespearean sonnet, also called an Elizabethan sonnet and sometimes called the English sonnet. So you can see from my little scribbles down the left-hand side where I've bracketed off the different parts that we've got quatrains. So the first quatrain is the first 4 lines, and you can see it ends with a full stop at the end of remove. So that is a complete unit of meaning. And then you've got the second quatrain that goes from line 5 to line 8, and those 2 quatrains together, that forms the first octave, or the first kind of main part of the argument of the sonnet. So a little bit like the Petrarchan sonnet, there is a break after the octave. However, the Elizabethan sonnet breaks into 2 lots of 4. Okay, so how is the sextet broken up? It's broken up into another quatrain, another set of 4, which is the yellow bit, all about time, and then it ends with a rhyming couplet. So this is the main difference really between the Petrarchan and the Elizabethan sonnet form, is that we end up with this little rhyming couplet, or like mini conclusion at the end of the sonnet form. Okay, so going through the meaning of the poem, first of all, I'm just going to read it and then like paraphrase it just to make sure the meaning is 100% clear before we go on to think about some of the devices that Shakespeare has used. Okay, so quatrain 1. Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediment. Okay, what does that mean? So again, I'm going to look at this in a bit more detail in a minute, but it is phrased in the negative, which can be a little bit confusing. So what is Shakespeare saying in that first statement? He is saying, if we phrase it in the positive, that it is possible for 2 people to be fully happy and united and married. That is possible. So he doesn't want to suggest that it is impossible for 2 people to be married and faithful to each other and truly happy. So it is a positive statement about the power of love and the value of marriage, but it's phrased in the negative. So I'll come back to why it's phrased in the negative later. So then he goes on to define love, the nature of love. Okay, that's what the whole next bit in pink is about. Love is not love which alters when it alteration finds, nor bends with the remover to remove. So again, this is 2 things about the qualities of love, both phrased in the negative. The first one is that love is constant. So love is not love which alters when it alteration finds. So true love is constant or loyal, or bends with the remover to remove. So if your lover goes away, you don't stop loving them. So love is constant, love is loyal, love is faithful, love isn't fickle, love is loyal to the person that you love. Okay, next section, still defining love. It is an ever-fixed mark that looks on tempests and is never shaken. It is the star to every wandering bark, whose worth's unknown though his height be taken. Okay, so this is going into the positive briefly to define love. Love as something which is a fixed mark, so a constant point. It doesn't waver, again, it doesn't change or alter. It's like strong and fixed. It's so fixed, it's like having a fixed point in the sky, like having a fixed star by which you can navigate your course through the oceans. So you can see that this is a metaphor. You can see this is an extended metaphor of navigation that we've got here. So love is like a guiding light, basically, and it's something which is strong and constant and helpful. And it's kind of hard to fathom as well, whose worth's unknown although his height be taken. So we can't fully understand this star, this guiding light, but we can measure by it. his height be taken. So we can use it to guide us, but we can't fully comprehend it. Okay, so that's all to do with love. Now Shakespeare moves on to still thinking about love really, but thinking more specifically about love over time. So love's not time's fool, though rosy lips and cheeks when his bending sickle's compass come. So what does this mean? So love doesn't just get tricked by youth. Love is not just attracted to the surface. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. So again, this is kind of on the topic of marriage. Love doesn't change over time. It doesn't change over a period of hours. It doesn't change over a period of weeks. Love should be like faithful to the end. So this reminds us a little bit of the marriage vows, doesn't it? This kind of death till death do us part type marriage vow that's being echoed here. So time is being presented as something which is obviously constantly shifting, something which is perhaps focusing on the superficiality of the here and now. So all of that is not what love is. Love is not tricked by what time presents in the here and now. Love kind of looks for the long term. So it's about long-term commitment. And then the conclusion, the couplet at the end. If this be error, so here he's talking now about his writing, if his statements that he's just made about love, if this poem basically is wrong, and upon me proved, I never writ nor no man ever loved. So he's basically staking his reputation on his statements about love. He's saying, if you can prove me wrong, that means that I am a terrible writer. I never wrote anything of value. And also you're proving that no man ever loved anyone. So he's staking kind of everything on his claims about love. Okay, so it's a famous poem. It's often read at marriages, and you can see why. It's very much kind of re-emphasizing the quality and the values of marriage and the marriage vows. So if we go through some of the language choices that Shakespeare has used, you can see that there are a lot of negatives, and quite often double negatives. So on the top left, I've written negative times 2. That's what we've got in that first sentence. Let me not to the marriage of true mind admit impediment. So impediment is a negative, like a barrier. So that's your second negative, and then not. So we've got not impediment. So a negative plus a negative is a positive. So basically he is making a positive statement about love. So why has he chosen to write so much in the negative? The way that this poem opens almost seems like it's a response to something. It seems to open almost in the middle, perhaps, of a conversation about love, where somebody has perhaps said to the narrator, oh, well, you don't believe in marriage, do you? And this seems to be a response to it, as if it is possible, but it's only possible if we're talking about the marriage of true minds. So this reads something like a qualifying statement. So that, I think, explains the use of the negative, that perhaps there is a slight cynicism to the tone of this poem, that it's not overtly gushing or romantic. Putting things in the negative seems to qualify something, rather than to express like an overt belief in love itself. It's couched quite carefully. So that continues basically through all the use of negatives by saying that love, what love is not love which alters when it alteration finds, draws our attention to this idea of alteration and change. So a lot of people in relationships, those relationships will change and the love will die, the emotions will change, the person will give up on the person. That's what Shakespeare wants to draw our attention to. And then to say, think about that, think about people who kind of give up on their relationships, and he's saying, well, that's not love. And the second statement as well, people who can't manage long distance relationships where the remover to remove. So if the person that they love goes away, they stop loving them. He's saying, well, that's not love. So he's basically giving us a couple of real life scenarios which do happen and acknowledging that they do happen, but then saying, well, that's not true love then, is it? So he's basically, what Shakespeare is doing by using the negative is helping us to understand relationships in general and how they function, and then to understand the nature of true love in relation to real life scenarios. So it stops it from being gushing and overly emotional. It keeps it very much grounded in real life relationships and the real world. That's the first stanza. We've also got this use of polyptoton. We've got alters, alteration, and remover, remove. So why has he chosen these pairs of words which are so closely linked? I think the effect of the polyptoton is to do with proximity. Because these words are physically close on the page and they're very semantically close in meaning, it shows how quickly love can change. Alters, alteration finds. So there's a speed in the connection between those words. So if the person that they love changes, that's alteration, then the love alters. And there's a very, very quick shift between those two things. Remover, remove. So the person has gone out of their life, so therefore their love goes as well. There's a sense of quick change happening, which comes from the polyptoton. And again, that adds to a sense of, well, that's not true love then, is it? If things are changing so quickly, then that isn't love. Next device we've got is an extended metaphor of navigation. This is explained largely by the context, that this is the era, the Elizabethan era of exploration, the Americas, the New World. So it's an exciting time for Britain, but it's also a perilous time. So in order for ships to navigate successfully across the Atlantic or wherever else, they have to use the stars. They have to use kind of this emerging science of longitude and latitude. So things like the fixed marks in the sky are incredibly important for saving sailors' lives, important for Britain economically, politically. So it's a very, very powerful extended metaphor. It would have had a lot of resonance in the Elizabethan age. So equating that with love kind of shows just how important, how crucial love is, how it can save lives, how it can improve everyone's well-being, everyone's quality of life. We've got a bit of personification in the next section. If we go on to the theme of time, we've got time with a capital T, so it's clearly personified. We've got a reference to the Grim Reaper within his bending sickle's compass comes. So time is actually linked to death here as well. So we're not to be fooled by a character such as time who lures us in with the temporary, because the temporary is obviously always ended by death. We've got some negatives as well. Love's not times full, love alters not. So it's got an echo of that ex negativo that we had in the first stanza. But then we have this positive statement. I've circled in red the positives. There are not that many of them. We had it with the extended metaphor. It is a never fixed mark. It is the star. And then we get another positive statement at the end of stanza 1, 2, 3, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. So this is a positive statement about the longevity of love, about how it can last and sort of be strong and conquer all odds. And obviously we end with a couplet, which, like I said, is a metatextual reference. So he's talking about poetry itself. What's the effect of the metatextual self-referentiality? Kind of reminds us of the author. By this stage, by the time that he's writing the sonnets and the 116th sonnet, Shakespeare is a well-established literary figure. And so therefore, this gives a lot more credibility, a lot more weight to the argument, because he's staking his own reputation on it.